Hey everybody, and thanks so much for tuning back in. It's me, Rob Marsiglio, back with another video this week about the Greater Toronto Area real estate market and specifically the sales totals. I've been harping on it a lot lately in my videos, but I put out a tweet this past week that garnered a bit of attention talking about how we actually just saw one of the busiest sales weeks from the freehold perspective in the Greater Toronto Area that we've seen all year. This is that tweet right here. So in the past week, freehold home sales in the GTA are about as busy as they've been all year. I'm not a big fan of just throwing statements around without providing a little bit more context. So this video is going to dive into, what did that week look like? What has happened since? We just went through the Thanksgiving long weekend. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody who celebrated. I hope it was great. So let's dive into a few more charts just to look at, what are sales activities doing now? How did it compare to those busiest stretches from a freehold and condo perspective? And then I want to put it all into perspective historically speaking. Just because we're busy right now, does that mean that, historically and relatively, has it been a busy October? So answering question number one, what is happening with the market right now? So this is a chart that covers the 7-day moving daily average of reported home sales from a freehold perspective. So you can see that this chart peaked out back in April. We had a week where we averaged that week every single day 154 freehold sales. At the peak in this kind of most recent little frenzy, if you want to call it, of sales, we saw 149 sales reported per day at the beginning of October. That kind of compares to what we saw in early June. You can see that this was sustained for about a week-long stretch. That 7-day daily moving average hovered around here for about a week's time. We didn't see the same sustained levels that we saw really going from February. We were just shy of 140 all the way through to the beginning of July before we fell off for the summer. So not sustained activity at this level, but we did reach kind of that busiest weekly pace that we have seen thereabouts in October. Now, it's important to note for context that is just the freehold market. Here we look at condos. That, again, peaked out back in April. We saw a week where there were 93 reported sales per day. This includes weekends. If we're talking just weekdays, this number is going to be up in the hundreds. For condo properties, it's going to be probably in the 200 to 300 range at the peak for freehold properties. But including weekends, we peaked out at around 93, like I said, in April. And this most recent stretch, we saw it peak out at about 75%. So, we're still 25 or so percent off of what we saw at the peak of the market from a condo perspective in the GTA. Those weekly moving averages give us an insight into how things are moving mid-month. It's tough to wait until the end of a month to see what the sales total ended up being. It doesn't really paint a picture of how sales trended throughout that month, which is why I like to do things on a daily and then weekly basis and build out these charts. Let's look at it from a monthly perspective though, because I want to highlight kind of where we are at from a sales perspective, where we're projected to be at, because while it was a busy start to October relative to weeks this year, it may not stack up the same way if we look at historical Octobers. Now here's a chart that I've shared many times. Again, it's the reported home sales trend across all property types per TREB MarketWatch data. This month over month plus 4.8% represents the change that you see in sales, the median change from September to October. So we'd expect to see 4.8% increase in sales totals from September to October. Adding in this orange line that represents 2024, you can see that we did follow trend relatively well, a little bit of an uptick that you'd expect to see pretty flat from August to September. But this jump in sales activity from September to October, at least what we're projecting sales to be at by the end of the month, which is right around 6,400-ish sales, that represents closer to a 28% increase in sales activity. I ranked every year going back to 2008 by percentage increase in sales month over month from September to October, and you can see that 2024 at 28% is far and away the biggest jump that we've seen. You have to go back to 2012 where we saw an 18% jump for the next kind of biggest increase from a percentage perspective. Again, smaller base from September to October this year, very suppressed sales volume relative to history. When we throw the percentages out and just look at it from an absolute sales jump, we're going to see about 1,400 more sales in October than we saw in September. Again, that will signal or represent the biggest jump in sales activity that we've seen going back to 2008 from September to October. So if it feels a little busier relative to last month right now, it definitely is. If it still feels slow from a market perspective compared to history, again, it is. As I alluded to before and showed you in that line graph, we are still projected to come up well shy of where you'd expect to see October sales land based on historical data. So let's jump into a few more of these charts. This first one looks at reported sales through 14 days of October. That's the bars down here, and compares it to where the month actually ended up. So this is for all property types, condos and freeholds right across the GTA. And you can see that based on our roughly 2,800 sales that we saw through the first 14 days in October, and kind of the average percentage of how many sales you'd expect to have reported, which is right around 44.5% through 14 days relative to the end of the month, we're going to end up at around 6,400 sales. This is a projection. That's a big jump from what we saw in 2023 and 2022. Again, it's about 1,400 more sales than we saw in 2022 and about 1,700 more sales than we saw in 2023. But you can see all of these dots of where October sales have ended up in the past. And prior to these two low amounts, you have to go all the way back to 2008 to see this 5,500 number. Every other year, October has seen at least 6,700 sales, if not more. Breaking it down by the freehold and condo markets now, let's do that. So we're projected to see about 4,300 freehold sales this year. Again, a big uptick from 2022 and 2023. You'd have to go all the way back to 2008 to see another slower year. So while we are experiencing a busier October than the last couple of years, putting it in perspective historically, we are still well shy of pretty much every other year going back to 2008. And to paint a bit clearer picture, I've done something similar. I've ranked every single October from a sales perspective. This is just total sales, where they ended up at the end of the month. This is for freehold properties. So you can see that 2020, that's really when things peaked out in October. We saw about 7,500-ish sales. This will actually rank 14th out of the 17 years, 2024. So feeling busier because of what we've come off of the last 2 years, but still very, very suppressed sales totals, especially considering where active inventory is now compared to most of these years. Turning our attention to the condo market, we're projected to be at about 2,100 sales using that similar methodology of trying to project where we end up based on how many sales occurred through 14 days versus the end of October total. So again, projecting 2,100 sales, an uptick from 2022 and 2023. We'll end up in that 2012, maybe 2010 level is what I'm projecting based on these numbers here. And again, that would rank 13th out of every year, the 17 years going back to 2008 for this is total sales, at least where we're projected to be by the end of October. So has the market picked up in October relative to September? Yes. Is that a surprise based on history? No. And are we busy based on history? Still no. You have to factor in that we have, over 25,000 active listings across the GTA. Still, I know that's down from the peak that we saw of around 26,000 active listings. But again, still much higher than any other time that we've seen going back to 2008, with the exception of some brief stints in 2009 and 2010. So again, very low sales activity considering the amount of inventory that is out there and just relative to history as a whole. The very last thing I want to touch on to give a little bit more context to these sales numbers is comparing sales as a percentage of new listings. So this is the historical trend. You can see that going back to 2008, 2009, we hover right around that 60% mark before things slow down in September. Again, that's more people bringing properties to market before buyers jump back in. And then sales as a percentage of new listings really takes off through the rest of the year. Much slower relative to new listings than we saw throughout the year. Still saw that dip in September, and then a bit of an uptick in October. And to paint the picture of what that uptick looks like, I want you to focus on these columns on the very right. The freehold market in September saw sales as a percentage of new listings just below 30%. And we saw on the condo side, things were just below 25%. Skip ahead to October, and sales as a percentage of new listings on the freehold side are up just shy of 48%, whereas on the condo side, it's up to about 35%. So this puts freehold properties across the GTA back into more of a balanced territory, at least in early October. A lot of that has to do with new listings numbers coming off. And on the condo side, similar thing, it's still in buyer's market territory. We're not seeing that market catch fire, and I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, but a big uptick relative to new listings from September to the early days of October. I hope I've been able to provide a little bit more context to what these sales numbers all mean and what the market is doing right now. I hope I've given you some clarity to help you through your real estate journey. If you have any questions about anything I covered in this video, all the contact information is down in the description. Feel free to book a call. If you know somebody who might get some use out of the things I talked about in this video, feel free to share it with them. Subscribe to the channel, like this video to help me reach more people just like you. And until we speak again next time, please stay safe and cheers.